In today's video, I'm gonna show you how to photograph a double Milky Way arch. But first of all, what's a double Milky Way arch? To put it simple, is what we can see of our Milky Way band from our planet. So from planet Earth, we can see two different parts of the Milky Way band. The most classic part is what we call the summer Milky Way, and that's roughly from mid-February until late June, early July. In that part, the most prominent area is of course the Milky Way core, the core of our galaxy, where we can also see other constellations like Sagittarius, Aquila, and other different parts. The other part that we have is what we call the winter Milky Way Arch, and that's basically what we can see in our planet from late November through roughly February, early March. In that area, the most prominent part is of course the Orion constellation, but we also have very prominent areas like Taurus, stars like Sirius, and other different parts that are very beautiful. The special thing about spring in the northern hemisphere is that we can capture both arches in the same night. And in this video, of course, I'm gonna show you how. First of all, we need to see where we can do this in the world. It's actually a big part of our planet. If you are in the northern hemisphere, anywhere from the equator up to a latitude of about 50, 51, 52 north latitude is possible. If you go further up, like northern Canada, Alaska, Iceland, Norway, the Milky Way core is not gonna be visible enough. So it's not possible there. But anywhere else in the northern hemisphere is gonna be possible. Also in the southern hemisphere, during a different time of the year, it's also possible in the spring during September. And yeah, it's perfectly possible to do it there, anywhere from a latitude 22 south all the way to Antarctica. So yeah, it's possible to capture that in a big area of our planet, and it's also good to consider when to do it. The time frame to do it is very, very narrow. And actually in the northern hemisphere and in the southern hemisphere is going to be practically the same, 1 month. In that month, it has to be during the new moon, which is also making a bigger restriction in the time frame. The main thing about the double Milky Way arch, and I have here a stellarium to show you, is to capture both arches with the same altitude, so the same elevation. For me, the ideal elevation for a Milky Way panorama, regardless if it's summer or winter, is gonna be between 45 and 60 degrees. If it's lower, it's gonna look a little bit flat, and it's gonna be most times, with the horizon, with the atmospheric haze, with light pollution, and with other problems. If it's higher up, it's gonna be very high in the sky, and it's gonna be very difficult to capture everything in one frame, and there's gonna be a big part of empty space in the middle. So for me, any Milky Way panorama is gonna be always between 45 to 60 degrees. So just keep that in mind, that the only time where you can do this is very narrow, and it's gonna be March in the northern hemisphere, September in the southern hemisphere. I'm now gonna jump into the steps that I recommend to follow if you want to attempt this challenging shot. And the first and probably the most important is the right planning. Planning is always important when you do any Milky Way shooting, any Milky Way panoramas, but for a double arch, it's also more critical. When you are doing a double Milky Way arch, you need to be very, very accurate with your planning, your times, your hours, the moon phase, and more things. Like we said, according to the Milky Way arch band in the sky, the only time frame in the northern hemisphere is gonna be around March. Depending on the year, it can be a little bit earlier, later, but if you want to have both arches with a nice proportion, that's gonna be March. Now in March, the time to do this is only during the new moon. There must be no moon in the sky, because any moon brightness is going to interfere with the images. For that reason, the time frame is gonna be maybe around 4 to 5 days during that month in March. I know it's narrow, but it's possible. And first of all, if you want to know very quickly those dates with the new moon, I recommend checking my Milky Way calendar. It's completely free, and you can see at a glance the best days of the year to shoot with a new moon. I'm gonna leave the link in the description where you can download your Milky Way calendar. Jumping now into a stellarium, I'm gonna show you the exact times to capture your images. We're gonna start always with the winter Milky Way arch. That's gonna be shooting after sunset. So here we have the sunset setting on the west, and then right after that you're gonna see the winter Milky Way Arch to the west. So the west is gonna be the middle of your panorama, of your composition, and there you'll see different parts like Orion, Sirius, Taurus, and different parts of the winter Milky Way Arch. The time frame for shooting again is gonna be very narrow. You have to be quick, because if you're taking a long time, the Milky Way band is gonna go lower in the sky, and then it's not gonna match with your summer arch. Also, if there are mountains and other problems, it's probably gonna be blocked. So be very careful about the time frame, and I don't recommend taking longer than probably half an hour to do your panorama. So this is the Orion winter Milky Way Arch, and once it's setting, maybe about an hour and a half after the blue hour, this winter is gonna be gone. And then before sunrise, we're going to the east and southeast, or you're gonna see how the Milky Way core is gonna be rising. So as you can see here, we can see how the core is rising in the sky, and we're gonna be shooting roughly until before sunrise. So as you can see here, this is roughly 50 degrees, which is a good reference, and that's gonna be right before the blue hour at sunrise. The main tip here, be again very careful with the timing, because if it's taking too long, it's probably you're gonna be getting into the blue hour and then you'll be missing your shot. So be always careful about that. Again, summing up, it's gonna be winter Milky Way Arch after sunset. Later you take a break, it's not gonna be too long, and then before sunrise you will be shooting your summer Milky Way Arch. Talking about the gear, of course you're gonna need camera, tripod, you're gonna need a wide angle lens, and this is one of the most important things. Focal length, I recommend something between 14 and 24 millimeters. The main reason is because if it's taking something longer like a 35, 40, 50 millimeters, it's gonna take you a long time to capture your panel, and then you're gonna run out of time. The winter Milky Way is gonna be too low, or the summer Milky Way is gonna be getting into the blue hour. So be mindful about your focal length. If it's your first double arch, I recommend something between 14 and 20 millimeters. If it's your second or you are very experienced, you can try maybe with a 24 to get more detail. But again, be very mindful with your focal length, and I recommend something wide so you don't have to capture multi-row panoramas. The other thing we need, of course, and we can use, is an astro modified camera. I do all my astro images with an astro modified camera. That means a camera with a special filter in the sensor where we remove the low pass filter and install a new filter where we can capture more light and more nebula. The thing about the nebula is, especially for the winter Milky Way Arch, we have a lot of rich hydrogen alpha nebula, like the Orion constellation, California, and also in the Milky Way core. So I highly recommend using an astro modified camera if you can. If not, it's fine, you can still capture your double Milky Way Arch. And if you have an astro modified camera, another layer of difficulty, if you are very experienced, is using an IH alpha filter, an additional hydrogen alpha filter, that is going to allow you to capture even more detail in those nebula. The other element that I highly recommend to get more detail is a star tracker. It doesn't matter the model, whatever tracker that works for you is going to be valid for this shooting. Using a tracker has multiple benefits, like shooting with better settings, like a lower ISO, with closing the aperture a little bit. I'm not gonna get into that in this video. There is a whole video that I made about star tracking that you can check here, where you can see all my recommendations about the star tracking, models, and everything. In my case, I use the Ventro Polaris, and I will show you later how I use it. But that's the tracker that I use. But again, whatever tracker you use is gonna give you more detail in your images. And then more gear for this shooting is, of course, batteries. It's gonna be a long night with a lot of shooting, so make sure you have extra batteries, a power bank, and if you are shooting in a place with high humidity, I recommend shooting with a lens heater. A lens heater is just like a small accessory that you can put in your lens, and it's going to prevent that humidity and that frost, if it's very cold, to get into your lens and to ruin your images. And that's basically everything. We don't need anything else for gear. Make sure you have a fully charged headlamp, and that's it. And the next step is shooting in a place with a nice 360 view. Doing a double arch requires doing a 360 view panorama, which is a complete panel, of all your surroundings. For that reason, the location is key, is fundamental. If there is anything like high mountains or trees or anything like that blocking your view, your picture is not gonna look nice. So my recommendation, look for a place with an ample wide view where there are no elements obstructing your view. In my case, I like Death Valley. It's a place with an ample view where there's no trees, no obstructions. But you can find many places, even high in the mountains, you can sometimes have beautiful views. Another tip when you're looking for your composition is to look for something with a strong, nice leading lines on the edges or in the south, in the middle. Sometimes it's difficult when you're composing 360, it's not what you're used to seeing with your own eyes. But yeah, it's a matter of practice, and I highly recommend to practice during the day. So wherever you want to go, scout and make sure that you can get a nice 360 composition in your location. Once we're in the field and you're scouting and you make sure the alignment is fine, you can use PhotoPills, Planet Pro, whatever application you like to make sure the alignment is correct. The next thing is to start taking your images. To take your images, I'm gonna give you one of my best recommendations, and that's to capture more than what you need. So in this scenario, a normal panorama is gonna be roughly around 180 if you're doing a 360. Don't capture a 180 panorama, capture more. In my experience, something like 240 to 260 degrees is gonna be enough for your panel. Maybe you're gonna get rid of the edges and you'll be cropping later, but that's fine. What matters to us is to have enough information in all our images. So make sure you capture more than what you need. Not all on the edges, but also on the top and the bottom. That's also critical. So if you're shooting with a very narrow focal length, again, like 24, 35, 50, something like that, you're gonna need multiple rows. And that's gonna make things more challenging. That's why I highly recommend something like 14, 20 for me is the perfect focal length for this shooting, or even 24. But again, be very careful with that and always capture more on the edges, on the top and on the bottom to have more room in the editing. The next thing when we are shooting is actually taking the panoramas. For the foreground, you only need one. In most scenarios, it's gonna be a 360 degree panorama and you only need one foreground for the entire image. You can capture this at night, after sunset, you can capture this before the Milky Way core, whatever works for you. Unless you have something like reflections or something moving in the foreground, which I'll show you later. In those scenarios, it's gonna be more tricky because you have to capture your foreground in the field both after sunset and before sunrise. But in normal scenarios where there is no moving elements in the foreground, it's perfectly fine to capture everything just in one set. Then you have to do, of course, your winter Milky Way Arch after sunset, and then your summer Milky Way Arch before sunrise. So in the end, you'll have three panoramas. One for the foreground, one for the winter Milky Way Arch, one for the summer arch. Getting back to Stellarium, and I'm gonna give you a few tips for your planning and your shooting. When you are doing your panoramas, in both of them, you're gonna start shooting from your right. So going from your right, that's gonna be north from the winter arch after sunset, or it's gonna be south for your summer Milky Way Arch before sunrise. The main reason, as you can see here, is that Orion is gonna be falling from the south all the way to the west. So if you start shooting from the east, you're gonna be chasing the Orion all the time. So in this case, you're gonna start shooting from here, from the right side, and going left. If you are doing multiple rows, you want to risk with a 24, 35, 40, my recommendation is to start shooting from the lower row. That way you are not chasing Orion and you'll be doing your first row here, so right to left, and then after that Orion is gonna be here, you'll be doing your second row. And that's perfectly fine, you can do it, but just be mindful about the timing. The other arch, which is the summer Milky Way Arch before sunrise, is the same thing. So we're gonna be shooting here. As you see, it's rising. So we're gonna start shooting from the right side all the way to the left, from the south all the way to the north. If you are doing multiple rows, in this case, we're gonna start the upper row from the top. So in this case, I'm gonna be shooting all the way here, my first row. The Milky Way core maybe is like this. I'm gonna start shooting my upper row and then get back, tilt down, and then I'm gonna do my second row at the bottom. Again, I had to remark this again because it's very likely that you run into issues. Be very mindful about this because there's a high risk of having issues with your images. Talking about the settings now, I don't gonna get too much into settings. I have a lot of videos about track panoramas and things like that where you can see the settings. But again, one recommendation, don't take too long. If you are shooting with a 20 mil, a 240 to 60 panorama is gonna be around 8 to 9 images. In my recommendation is to shoot maybe 2 minutes per panel. So that will be maybe around 20 minutes for your panorama. You can risk maybe 1 more minute, 3 minutes, it's gonna take you about half an hour, and that will be probably my limit. Don't shoot longer than half an hour because one of your arches is gonna be either lower or too high with the blue hour after sunrise, So be very, very mindful about your exposure time and your calculations for your panoramas. That's the most critical part. If you are not using a tracker, that's gonna be very easy because you have plenty of time. But if you are stacking multiple images or doing tracking, in those scenarios, be very mindful with your calculations and with your time. And once you finish your shooting, you're gonna be destroyed. Trust me, it's very, very tiring. But yeah, once you capture these images, this is gonna be the most exhausting shooting in your life. Now it's time to get into the editing, which is gonna be probably the most tiring editing that you've ever done. But take it easy, be patient, because it's possible. The first thing you're gonna do when you are doing your editing, you're gonna be doing your basic raw file editing in Lightroom, whatever software you use, adjusting your white balance, your exposure, just basic settings. Then you're gonna export as a TIFF, and after that we'll be working on stitching our panoramas. Again, 3 panoramas. You're gonna stitch 1 for your foreground, or 2 if there are reflections or anything like that, and then you're gonna stitch your panel for the winter Milky Way Arch and your panel for your summer Milky Way Arch. Highly recommend using PTV Pro. You can stitch them in Lightroom, Photoshop, but for advanced panoramas like this, I strongly recommend an advanced panoramic software like PTV Pro, which is gonna make things easier. If you use Windows, you can use Microsoft ICE, which is free. But yeah, PTV Pro for me is the way to go when I'm stitching these panels. After that, it's time for the blending, and that's probably the most complicated part in entire processing. The foreground again is not too difficult unless there are reflections. For the sky, things are gonna be a little bit more complicated. So for blending both images, here's my first recommendation. There are 2 options. When you do any 360 panorama, you can stitch your panels either from the north or from the south. Don't do it from the north. If you do it from the north, the panorama is not gonna look very nice. However, if you do it from the south, you're gonna have in the middle your Milky Way core and Orion, and then probably you can put a subject or something prominent in the foreground, whatever. But the main thing for the sky is that you will have your summer Milky Way core and your Orion core, kind of in the middle. If you leave those on the edges, it's gonna be a little bit distracting. So when you are doing your blending, blend your panels from the south. The south is gonna be your central point in your panels. And when you're composing in the field, always consider that south is the most important part. Then after doing the blending, which is gonna take some time, trust me, but put in the time because that's the most critical area. After that, you're gonna do your normal edit. So blend everything, start working on your Milky Way detail, structure, stretching, colors, whatever you do. If you want to see my whole process, I recommend checking my Milky Way course where you can see all the details, how I edit my images. And yeah, but the main thing when you're editing, be patient because it can take some time. And after all this instruction, it's time to go into the field to capture our double Milky Way arch. So let's go to Death Valley and let's take this double Milky Way arch.
And welcome to Devil's Golf Course. I'm in a flooded area of the Bathwater Basin. It was flooded since last August, then re-flooded again in February. I've been shooting here since February, since I came back to the US, and I'm here now in March. Very special time of the year. The only time of the year where we can do both the winter Milky Way Arch and the summer Milky Way Arch in the Northern Hemisphere. So I'm super excited to be here. I have a very ambitious image in mind, which is doing a double arch. I haven't seen many of this, just my colleagues Michal Minkov, which incredible image you can see here. That was the first one I saw. And then my friend Gonzalo Santille from Argentina, who captured this other incredible double arch. So I felt that I had to do my version, and I couldn't think of a better place than Death Valley for doing this. Main reason, we're in a flat open basin with a very nice open view to the mountains, as you can see. I've been checking photo pills and the alignment is perfect. I'm here with all these nice salt formations, reflections. It can be better than this. And checking photo pills, the winter Milky Way Arch is gonna do something like this, and that's gonna be around 10:30. And later this summer Milky Way core is gonna start rising here with the core over there, and that'll be before sunrise around 4 o'clock. So the plan for now is to scout a little bit this area, but it's gonna be pretty easy because everything is full of nice reflections, so I can pick up anywhere and then get back for the winter Milky Way. That's gonna be after sunset. Go to sleep, take a nap, and then get back for the early rising Milky Way core. So I'm super excited. Let's see how it goes. Today I'm attempting to do one of the most ambitious astro images that I've ever tried to date. It's basically a two Milky Way arch, or double arch, where we wear the winter Milky Way Arch and the summer Milky Way core arch. It's basically this time of year, March in the Northern Hemisphere, where during a few days around the new moon, we can actually get both arches in the same image. It's gonna be a 360 panorama. I've never tried anything like this before. I've done multiple big panels, but never anything like this. In top of that, I'm doing this with reflections, which is gonna add another component of difficulty. And we'll see what happens. It's a beautiful night tonight in Death Valley. It's completely clear, no wind, and everything looks perfect. So it's gonna be a long night. Night's around 7 o'clock. So I'm gonna start shooting around 8, finish Orion around 11, take a quick nap, and get back around 2 a.m. to shoot the Milky Way core until sunrise, basically. So it's gonna be a really long night, very challenging. I don't know how this is gonna work out, but I like to push myself to new challenges. This is probably like not a once in a lifetime, but something similar. Devil's Golf Course is partially flooded, which is really rare. The road to get here is closed, which means you need to do a 2-mile hike, and I hope that nobody comes here for that reason. So most likely I will be alone, or I hope so. And very special conditions in a very special place, and I'm looking forward to this. The gear I'm gonna use is the Ventro Polaris Star Tracker. That's gonna be my main tool for tracking the sky. Simultaneously, I'm gonna use my Sony A1 to do my foreground, and that way I can capture the Milky Way Arch and the reflection at the same time. Otherwise, it will be literally impossible. So that's gonna be the main tool. If you want to know more information, make sure you check out my Ventro Polaris course, where I explain everything in detail about this little toy. And that's gonna be my main tools, Sony A1, Sony A7 III, Astro modified. So I'm super excited about this, and let's rock and roll. So I just finished the first part of the session, and it went really well. The sky was incredible, the reflection was perfect, and I couldn't ask for better conditions so far. I was shooting the sky with the Ventro Polaris, tracking the sky in a panorama of 8 images. Every frame was 2 minutes, f2.5, and ISO 1250. That was getting a lot of detail. I was getting beautiful stars, and I'm really happy with the skies. I was doing different arches, so I took around 3 different arches with different degrees. I know roughly the degrees that I like for the arch, but just in case I was taking more. At the same time, simultaneously, I was with the boots shooting the reflection. and everything went really well with the 14 mil, getting beautiful reflection, beautiful stars, and yeah, just taking more and more images. So now it's time to take a nap. It's getting chilly here in Death Valley, so I have about 2 hours to hike back, take a quick nap, and then get back and do the Milky Way core. Hopefully it'll be still clear, still calm, with no wind for the reflection. We'll see, and let's see how it goes. Half of the thing is done, and I can't wait to see the end. And the night is over. I'm back at the van. It's almost sunrise. It's blue hour, but the sun is gonna rise in a few minutes. And it's been an exhausting night. I think this is probably the most challenging astro image I've ever taken, considering all the time, 2 setups, tracking the sky, doing reflections. It's been non-stop, but I'm very happy with the results. I'm pretty sure something good is gonna come out of this. It's gonna be a pain to do all the editing, especially considering the stitching of the 2 arches, but let's see how it goes.
And that's everything. Like you saw, this is a very challenging image, but it's perfectly possible. You can do it, and yeah, just keep in mind about the planning. Planning is probably the most critical part for this type of shooting, and then the time in the field. It's gonna be very tiring because you're gonna be shooting all night, but yeah, it's perfectly doable. So yeah, I hope you like this video. Like, subscribe, and if you have any questions, please leave it in the comments. See you under the stars.